One
One
orange.
orange.
Just one.
Just one.
For many children
For
in
many
Victorian
children in
England,
Victorian
that
England,
single piece
that
of fruit
single
was
piece
not
of
just a
fruit
treat.
was not just
It was
a treat.
the only gift
It
they
was
would
the
ever see
only
on
gift
Christmas
they would.
morning. While the wealthy dined on roasted goose, puddings, and fine wines under glittering candlelight, poor children counted themselves lucky if they received an orange, a crust of bread, or nothing at all. This is the untold story of Victorian Christmas, a season where dreams and desperation collided, where joy and sorrow walked hand in hand.
London in the 19th century was a city of dazzling lights and choking shadows. A place where the splendor of wealth and the brutality of poverty existed not just side by side, but often within sight of one another. Nowhere was this more visible than in the weeks surrounding Christmas, when the season of supposed joy revealed the sharpest edges of social inequality. By the 1840s, Christmas in Britain had undergone a transformation. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert popularized the Christmas tree, drawing on Albert's German traditions, and this innovation quickly spread among the middle and upper classes. Illustrated newspapers showed royal children gathered around decorated fir trees with presents at their feet, inspiring imitation across the country. For the wealthy elite of London, Christmas became an opportunity to display prosperity in spectacular fashion. Their homes were adorned with evergreens, expensive candles, and imported decorations, and their dining tables sagged beneath the weight of roast goose, venison, puddings soaked in brandy, and the finest wines that global trade could deliver. In Mayfair, Belgravia, and Kensington, mansions glowed with candlelight and echoed with the sound of orchestras and choirs. Families like the Grosvenors, the Cavendishes, and newly risen industrialists flaunted fortunes by throwing lavish balls in honor of the holiday. These gatherings were not simply about festivity. They were public demonstrations of wealth, reminders of their place in society's upper tier. Servants in livery rushed across polished floors, carrying silver trays, while ladies in silk gowns and jewels worth small fortunes toasted beside roaring fires. For them, Christmas was both a sacred celebration and a social performance, but only a few miles away. In the East End districts of Whitechapel, Bethnal Green, and Spitalfields, Christmas told a different story. In these neighborhoods, tens of thousands of families huddled in single-room dwellings, often with broken windows patched by rags, damp walls, and no heat to shield them from the freezing London fog. Coal was expensive, and for many, fuel for warmth was a luxury. Children wrapped themselves in thin coats or shared torn blankets, while mothers boiled cabbage water or thin gruel to keep hunger at bay. For them, Christmas meant survival, not celebration. The contrast was most visible in the city's streets. On Regent Street and Oxford Street, shop windows glittered with imported toys, mechanical novelties, sweet confections, and luxury fabrics. The rise of consumerism in Victorian Britain was nowhere clearer than in these holiday displays. Department stores such as Whiteley's and the Army and Navy stores used elaborate decorations to draw in middle-class shoppers eager to indulge in the new culture of Christmas giving. Gaslights illuminated streets bustling with carriages delivering packages, and gentlemen tipped their hats while purchasing boxes of cigars or bottles of French champagne for Christmas Day. Yet in the East End, the same holiday season meant overcrowded soup kitchens and the faint hope of charity. The ragged schools and philanthropic missions, inspired by evangelical reformers like Lord Shaftesbury, distributed small meals of bread and soup, occasionally supplemented with a slice of meat or pudding donated by wealthier benefactors. For children of the poor, even the chance of receiving a single orange or sweet bun could mark Christmas as special. A fruit that the wealthy considered common became, for the impoverished, a rare luxury. Charles Dickens, more than any other figure, captured these contrasts. His 1843 novella, A Christmas Carol, emerged directly from the conditions of industrial London. Through the figure of Ebenezer Scrooge, Dickens addressed the moral blindness of the wealthy toward the suffering of the poor. The story's immense popularity reflected the nation's recognition of the divide that Christmas so clearly exposed. The Cratchit family's modest goose and plum pudding, eaten with joy despite their poverty, became the emblem of working-class endurance in the face of hardship. Dickens's call for generosity was not an invention, it was a plea drawn from real conditions in the city around him. The Industrial Revolution had transformed Britain into the world's leading economic power, yet it also produced unprecedented urban poverty. Families who once lived in rural villages migrated to London in search of work, only to find themselves trapped in overcrowded tenements and employed in dangerous, underpaid labor. Child labor was widespread. Boys and girls as young as 6 or 7 worked in factories, mines, and as street sellers. For these children, Christmas Day was often no different from any other, except for the fleeting chance of a church service, a handout, or a rare treat from a passing philanthropist. Meanwhile, the wealthy elite continued to expand their reach. Families like the Vanderbilts in America and the Rothschilds in Europe set new global standards for extravagance, influencing London's upper classes to compete in displays of holiday luxury. Imported pineapples, exotic fruits, French pastries, and German marzipan appeared on tables not just for taste but as status symbols. Newspapers printed descriptions of aristocratic Christmas feasts, creating both admiration and resentment among the lower classes who could barely afford bread. Philanthropy became a defining feature of the season, though often steeped in paternalism. Wealthy donors organized Christmas dinners for the poor, such as those at Dr. Bernardo's homes for orphaned children, or distributed gifts through parish charities. While these acts were welcomed, they highlighted rather than solved the divide. A single meal in December could not erase the hunger, disease, and insecurity that plagued poor families year-round. Yet to the children who received them, such moments could feel miraculous. The fog itself became a character in this story of contrasts. London's infamous pea soupers, created by coal smoke mixing with damp winter air, blanketed the city in a haze that blurred the lines between its gilded and grim realities. A carriage leaving a ball in Mayfair might, within half an hour, pass through alleys where barefoot children begged in the same fog. The same gaslights that illuminated luxury shop windows also flickered above gin shops and lodging houses where the destitute sought shelter for a penny. The church remained a central presence in both worlds, though its role differed. In wealthy parishes, Christmas services were followed by elegant dinners and caroling around piano. In the East End, mission churches provided the only warm space some families would enter all season. Religious organizations used Christmas as an opportunity to preach both spiritual salvation and moral reform, hoping to guide the poor away from what reformers considered vice and idleness. For many of the poor, however, the church service was simply a respite from the cold. This duality, the light of wealth and the shadow of poverty, defined the Victorian Christmas experience. While one family might unwrap toys imported from Germany, another family just streets away might gather gratefully around a single candle, sharing an orange as though it were treasure. The season was meant to symbolize generosity, yet it revealed more starkly than any other moment of the year how divided society remained. The legacy of this contrast shaped the cultural memory of Christmas. Stories of deprivation and hope circulated in newspapers and sermons, fueling campaigns for reform. At the same time, the image of abundance solidified the holiday as a festival of consumption. These twin forces, charity and consumerism, emerged from the same Victorian winter, setting patterns that continue to influence Christmas traditions today. In the end, London's winter streets told two stories. In the West, glittering lights, feasts, and music celebrated prosperity and tradition. In the East, hunger, cold, and the dream of a single orange told of survival against overwhelming odds. Both belonged to the same city, both to the same season, yet they might as well have been worlds apart. This was the winter of contrasts, the true face of Christmas in Victorian England. By the early 19th century, Christmas in England was undergoing a profound transformation. What had once been a loosely celebrated holiday, often marked by rowdy gatherings, drunkenness, and local fairs, was gradually reshaped into a more family-centered, sentimental, and ritualized occasion. This evolution was driven by social reformers, the rising middle class, and, most notably, the influence of Queen Victoria and her consort, Prince Albert. Prince Albert, who came from Germany, brought with him the Germanic tradition of the Christmas tree, decorated with candles, fruit, and sweets. The royal family's adoption of this practice in Windsor Castle around the 1840s was publicized in widely circulated illustrations and newspapers, sparking a nationwide trend. Families across England sought to emulate the monarchy, placing fir trees in their homes, decorating them with ornaments, and providing gifts beneath the branches. This simple act bridged Germanic and English traditions, turning the tree into an enduring symbol of the holiday. Charles Dickens also played a critical role in shaping the modern perception of Christmas. His novella, A Christmas Carol, 1843, depicted both the moral consequences of greed and the joys of generosity and familial love. Dickens's story resonated with the burgeoning middle class, which increasingly sought to define Christmas as a period of kindness, charity, and domestic warmth. The novella's vivid portrayal of the Cratchit family, modest yet joyful despite scarcity, highlighted the human capacity for celebration even under adversity. Dickens's narrative was both a critique of social inequality and a template for the sentimental, moralized Christmas that would dominate Victorian culture. The rise of consumer culture further shaped this holiday. Industrialization enabled the mass production of toys, candies, and ornaments, making gifts more accessible to the middle class, though still out of reach for the poor. Department stores such as Whiteley's and the Army and Navy stores began promoting Christmas shopping as a social ritual, with elaborate window displays attracting families eager to partake in the spectacle. These developments created a tension between the growing commercialization of the holiday and its original religious and communal meanings. Meanwhile, for the working class, Christmas remained limited by economic realities. Families saved small sums throughout the year in anticipation of the holiday, and charitable organizations provided occasional relief in the form of food, small gifts, or access to church celebrations. The disparity between public displays of affluence and private deprivation became more pronounced during this period. As urban centers grew rapidly and the gap between rich and poor widened, the Victorian emphasis on childhood as a period of innocence and wonder contributed to these shifts. Children became central to Christmas celebrations, both as recipients of gifts and as symbols of moral and familial values. Literature, music, and emerging traditions, such as caroling and nativity plays, reinforced the notion that Christmas was a time to nurture children's imagination, morality, and sense of wonder. Yet for the poorest children, this period of innocence was often brief, punctuated by labor and hunger, highlighting the stark contrasts that defined the era. Charitable institutions, inspired by both evangelical and philanthropic movements, sought to address these inequalities. Orphanages, ragged schools, and mission halls organized festive meals, donated toys and small gifts, including the now famous oranges that symbolized both rarity and hope. These interventions, while limited in scope, introduced a sense of participation in the holiday for those excluded from wealthier celebrations. Public celebrations also evolved. Mid-century London saw an expansion of caroling, street parades, and community fairs. Town criers, church bells, and gaslit streets created a festive atmosphere, blending communal engagement with commercial spectacle. Newspapers published articles on proper Christmas etiquette, recipes for seasonal foods, and suggestions for charitable acts, reinforcing the cultural norms of a respectable celebration. The interplay between royalty, literature, commerce, and charity culminated in a distinctly Victorian interpretation of Christmas, a holiday that combined moral instruction, family intimacy, social observation, and consumer spectacle. It was during this period that the traditions we now associate with the holiday decorated trees, gift-giving, charitable acts, caroling, and festive meals became widely codified. Yet these developments were not universally experienced. While middle and upper-class families adopted the comforts and joys of the redefined Christmas, working-class and impoverished families continued to confront harsh realities. Oranges, sugar, and toys remained luxuries, and the true spirit of the holiday often relied on imagination and communal solidarity rather than material abundance. The contrasts were stark. Christmas could simultaneously be a season of opulence and a time of deprivation, a window into both human generosity and societal inequality. This tension between abundance and scarcity, spectacle and survival would define the holiday for generations of Londoners. The birth of the modern Victorian Christmas was not merely a cultural transformation. It was a lens through which the complexities of social class, industrialization, and morality could be observed. The legacy of this period endures. The customs, symbols, and narratives established in Victorian England continue to shape how Christmas is celebrated today. From the glowing fir trees in living rooms to the charitable campaigns for the less fortunate, the season remains intertwined with both joy and reflection, luxury and empathy. The origins of these practices remind us that Christmas, for all its light and cheer, was always a mirror of society, reflecting both its generosity and its inequities. In Victorian England, oranges were more than fruit, they were symbols, luxuries, and sometimes the only tangible sign of Christmas for children of the poor. Imported largely from Spain and Portugal, oranges were expensive and seasonal. For most working-class families, a single orange could cost a week's worth of pennies, making it a treasure reserved for the holiday season. To hold that fruit in one's hand was to hold hope, indulgence, and a fleeting moment of joy amid the cold reality of scarcity. The Industrial Revolution had transformed trade and distribution in Britain, allowing exotic goods to arrive in London's markets more reliably. Yet, the benefits of this system were highly unequal. Wealthy households placed oranges on their tables alongside roasted meats, puddings, and sugar plums. For them, the fruit was a decorative item, an accompaniment to abundance. In contrast, for children living in slums or laboring in factories. The orange represented the entire extent of their Christmas celebration. Many saved the peel carefully, sniffing its fragrant aroma for hours, savoring a moment that would pass in seconds once the fruit was eaten. This disparity was not only economic but symbolic. Oranges became a marker of social status, a way for families to demonstrate generosity, and a tool through which charitable organizations could provide tangible relief. Mission halls, parish charities, and ragged schools often distributed oranges as part of holiday celebrations, transforming the fruit into both sustenance and symbol. For children, receiving an orange could define the memory of an entire era, token of recognition in a society that otherwise overlooked their existence. The emphasis on oranges also reflected broader Victorian anxieties about childhood, morality, and nutrition. Reformers and social commentators frequently argued that poor children needed proper nourishment, moral guidance, and structured recreation. The orange, in this context, served as a small but meaningful intervention, a rare treat that reinforced the ideals of care and benevolence. Diaries and letters from the period frequently mention the joy of receiving such gifts, noting that the fruit's rarity magnified its emotional impact. Moreover, oranges held spiritual connotations for many families. Their bright color symbolized the light of Christ, and their sweetness suggested divine providence. In religious institutions, oranges were sometimes accompanied by small tokens or verses, linking the physical gift to lessons in morality, gratitude, and piety. These practices reinforced the Victorian approach to Christmas as a season that combined festivity with moral instruction, particularly for children whose families lived in deprivation. For working-class parents, the act of giving a single orange required careful planning and sacrifice. They often purchased it weeks in advance, saving coins painstakingly earned from factory labor, domestic service, or street vending. The anticipation surrounding the fruit was nearly as significant as the consumption itself. When a child finally unwrapped or received the orange on Christmas morning, it represented not merely the fruit itself, but the love, effort, and hope invested by their family. Accounts from the period highlight the emotional weight of this small gesture. Letters, diaries, and newspaper reports describe children clutching oranges to their chests, their eyes wide with excitement, their joy magnified by scarcity. Even in urban workhouses, where institutional rules limited personal possession and indulgence, small allowances of fruit or candy could transform the day into an extraordinary event. Oranges were rare enough that their distribution required organization, often involving teachers, clergy, or charitable volunteers, who oversaw the equitable sharing of the precious commodity. The symbolism of the orange also extended into the literary culture of Victorian England. Charles Dickens, in A Christmas Carol and other works, highlighted the small pleasures that could bring immense joy to children living in poverty. Oranges, nuts, and simple confections were frequently cited as emblematic of modest generosity and the human capacity for empathy. The literature underscored the point that, in a society divided by wealth and class, small gestures could have disproportionate emotional impact. Oranges also provided lessons in gratitude and perspective. For children accustomed to daily hardship, the fruit symbolized abundance within scarcity. It taught appreciation for modest gifts and instilled a sense of wonder that transcended economic limitations. Families often used these moments to reinforce communal bonds, gather relatives, and celebrate endurance through ritualized meals or shared treats. The simplicity of the orange contrasted sharply with the opulence displayed in the homes of the wealthy, making the fruit a poignant reminder of both disparity and resilience in many ways. The tradition of the single orange foreshadowed the modern emphasis on symbolic gifts and experiential value over material excess, while the wealthy continued to indulge in extravagant displays. The poor found meaning in what was attainable. This divergence in experience shaped cultural narratives around Christmas, emphasizing the duality of the season: celebration for some, survival for others. Historical accounts make it clear that these small acts, sharing a fruit, lighting a candle, singing a carol, formed the emotional backbone of the holiday for children and families living in challenging circumstances. Ultimately, the orange was more than sustenance. It was a vessel for memory, emotion, and moral instruction. Its significance transcended taste or nutrition, becoming a narrative device through which the wider society's inequalities were both revealed and temporarily alleviated. The single orange symbolized the fragility of joy amid hardship, the careful planning of love in poverty, and the enduring hope that the festive season could bring light to lives otherwise dominated by toil and deprivation. Even in retrospect, the stories of children receiving oranges remain compelling, offering modern audiences a lens into the lived realities of Victorian London. The simple fruit, so ordinary today, was in its historical context an extraordinary emblem of care, sacrifice, and the fragile triumphs of childhood amidst urban hardship. Its significance endures in historical memory, reminding us that even the smallest gifts can carry immense meaning when framed by the harsh conditions of daily life and the human longing for joy. In the shadowed alleys, narrow courts, and crowded tenements of Victorian London, childhood was far from the idyllic image that many associate with the Christmas season. For the city's poor, winter brought harsh realities: freezing temperatures, insufficient clothing, and a constant struggle for food. Children, some no older than 6 or 7, bore the brunt of poverty, laboring long hours in factories, workshops, and domestic service, while still expected to carry on with basic schooling or household duties. Their world was one of contrasts. Fleeting moments of play and joy existed alongside enduring deprivation and vulnerability. The Industrial Revolution, while creating unprecedented wealth for some, transformed the lives of the urban poor. Factories employed thousands of children to tend machines, sweep floors, or deliver materials, often for 12 to 14 hours a day. In textile mills and coal depots, accidents were common, and the risk of injury or chronic illness was high. Girls were frequently employed as domestic servants, a position that, while providing shelter and food, subjected them to long hours, minimal freedom, and the whims of their employers. Children's lives were thus dominated by labor from dawn to dusk, leaving little room for leisure or festive celebration. Education, when accessible, was rudimentary. Ragged schools, established by philanthropists and religious organizations, offered basic reading, writing, and arithmetic, but attendance was irregular. Many children were too hungry or overworked to attend consistently, and Christmas provided only a brief respite. Mission halls and Sunday schools sometimes supplemented education with simple treats or festive activities, allowing children to experience a semblance of holiday joy despite their hardships. Street life also shaped childhood. Many children became street vendors, selling matches, fruit, or small goods to support their families. The city's foggy streets were both playground and workplace, and survival required a keen sense of awareness. Begging, scavenging, and cooperative play among peers became strategies for navigating urban hardship. Historical records, including journals, newspaper accounts, and letters from the period, highlight the ingenuity and resilience of these children who learned to balance play, work, and familial responsibility from a young age. The holiday season offered a temporary divergence from labor. Workhouses, parishes, and charitable institutions organized small Christmas events, providing a meal, a gift, or a festive gathering. These occasions, though limited, were eagerly anticipated. An orange, a small toy, or a simple sweet could define a child's Christmas experience. Yet these interventions were not universally available, and many children remained on the streets or in overcrowded tenements, observing the celebrations of the wealthier from a distance. Health was another pressing concern. Poor ventilation, damp conditions, and inadequate nutrition contributed to widespread illness. Diseases such as tuberculosis, cholera, and typhoid were common, and winter exacerbated their effects. Children in slums were particularly vulnerable, and mortality rates were high. Medical care was limited, often accessible only to those who could afford it or through charitable clinics. This reality meant that even the small joys of Christmas were often shadowed by fear and fragility. Despite these challenges, communities created networks of support. Neighbors shared resources, older siblings cared for younger ones, and informal education and play emerged from necessity. Songs, rhymes, and games were passed down orally, fostering a sense of cultural continuity even amid deprivation. Christmas, when it arrived, became a time for these small communal rituals to shine, whether in the form of a shared meal, a carol sung in the courtyard, or the distribution of donated treats. Contemporary accounts reveal the emotional texture of these experiences. Letters written by social reformers and visitors to the East End frequently describe the astonishment and joy of children receiving gifts, however modest. For those few hours, the burdens of labor and hunger were temporarily lifted, replaced by wonder and the recognition that their existence, though marginalized, had value in the eyes of others. These narratives also emphasize the contrast with wealthier children, whose Christmases were marked by abundance, formal entertainment, and attention from adults. The disparity reinforced societal hierarchies, but also underscored the resilience and creativity of poor children, who found ways to celebrate and imagine despite material scarcity. Even the simple act of peeling an orange slowly, sharing a slice with siblings, or decorating a modest home became profound expressions of joy, resourcefulness, and hope. Charity, while limited, played a complex role. Institutions such as Dr. Bernardo's homes and parish missions sought to provide sustenance, clothing, and instruction. Christmas was a prime opportunity for these organizations to act, offering what little they could in the form of festive meals, gifts, and organized events. Yet the very need for such interventions highlighted systemic inequality. Wealthy patrons funded these activities, but the broader conditions of poverty remained unaddressed. The cultural imagination of Victorian London increasingly reflected these realities. Literature, periodicals, and later social reports documented the lives of children in the shadows, providing evidence that their experiences were both harrowing and formative. Stories of resilience, cleverness, and fleeting happiness circulated, reinforcing the importance of community and moral education. The image of the impoverished child clutching a single orange, standing in a frosty street, became emblematic of the era's contrasts, hope against adversity, innocence amidst hardship. By the mid-19th century, the notion of a child-centered Christmas had become entrenched. Even if access to its benefits remained uneven, advocates for children argued for greater social reforms, emphasizing health, education, and nutrition. While the public's fascination with charitable acts and philanthropic displays increased awareness of poverty, children in the shadows, though often invisible to the wider society, became the moral center of debates about wealth, generosity, and the responsibilities of the affluent. The dichotomy between the rich and the poor during the holiday season was thus both stark and instructive. The experiences of children in London's poorest districts reveal a city where wealth, progress, and festivity existed alongside suffering, deprivation, and precarious survival. The shadows were not simply metaphorical, they represented streets, alleys, and households where life was fragile, fleeting, and dependent on the goodwill of others, the strength of family networks, and the resilience of youth. Ultimately, these children shaped the moral and cultural imagination of Victorian England. Their struggles inspired literature, guided charitable work, and laid the groundwork for reforms that would gradually improve urban living conditions. Yet in the moment, Christmas remained a season of contrasts, a fleeting opportunity to experience warmth, joy, and community in a world dominated by labor, illness, and scarcity. The shadows in which these children lived were never fully illuminated, but their stories endure as testament to the resilience, ingenuity, and enduring spirit of the most vulnerable members of Victorian society. In the grey, fog-laden streets of Victorian London, the sound of Christmas carols carried a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold, damp air. Singing had long been a part of England's holiday traditions, but the Victorian era transformed carolling into both a communal activity and a tool of moral and social instruction. Street carols, church services, and neighborhood gatherings offered brief moments of celebration for children and adults alike, bridging gaps between wealth and poverty, and providing a soundtrack to the season of contrasts. Churches played a central role in shaping caroling practices. Parish congregations organized rehearsals for hymns and seasonal songs, encouraging participation from both children and adults. In the wealthier districts, choirs performed for congregations of well-dressed attendees, while in poorer neighborhoods, mission halls and ragged schools offered spaces for informal singing. Carols were not only a form of entertainment, they were a means of inculcating moral values, celebrating Christian narratives, and reinforcing a sense of community. Lyrics emphasized generosity, familial love, and piety, aligning with Victorian ideals of the season. Street caroling, however, had a more populist character. Groups of children, sometimes as young as 6, would gather in pairs or small bands, singing in alleyways, courtyards, and at the entrances of wealthier homes. While many sang for coins or treats, the practice was as much about social, ritual, and tradition as it was about reward. Historical accounts describe children's voices echoing through narrow lanes, blending with the clatter of horse-drawn carriages, the creaking of shutters, and the muffled conversations of residents. Even in the harshest districts, caroling created moments of joy, laughter, and shared cultural expression. Music publishers began to capitalize on this tradition, printing carol books for families and schools. Collections often included both traditional folk songs and newly composed pieces, such as God Rest Ye Merry, Gentlemen, or The First Noel. These publications standardized the repertoire, allowing carols to spread more widely across social classes. The accessibility of printed music meant that children and amateur musicians could learn songs at home or in school, reinforcing the communal aspects of the holiday and making music an essential feature of Victorian Christmas culture. Charitable organizations also integrated caroling into their seasonal efforts. Mission halls frequently arranged concerts or sing-alongs for impoverished children, often accompanied by simple refreshments such as bread, milk, or small sweets. Carols thus became both a form of moral instruction and a tool for engagement, drawing children and families into communal activities that provided structure, pleasure, and social cohesion. In some cases, well-to-do patrons would listen from their balconies or doorsteps, donating coins or treats to the singers, further linking music with the culture of charity and social responsibility. The sensory environment of Victorian Christmas amplified the impact of carols. Snow, when it fell, blanketed the city in muffled whiteness, softening the harsh edges of brick buildings, cobbled streets, and industrial factories. Street lamps and candles flickered, casting warm glows on frozen puddles and icy eaves, while children's voices rang out in clear, sharp tones. The combination of sound, light, and seasonality created a heightened sense of occasion, turning the act of singing into a performative, immersive experience. Carols also reflected cultural continuity. Many were rooted in folk traditions that predated the Victorian era, carrying narratives of rural life, Christian mythology, and seasonal cycles into the urban industrial landscape. By singing these songs, children and adults alike participated in a living tradition that connected them to the past, reinforcing collective identity even as the city rapidly modernized. In this way, carols became a bridge across generations, neighborhoods, and classes, offering continuity in a world of accelerating change. Children of the poor, in particular, experienced carols as both entertainment and escape. The act of singing provided a temporary departure from labor, hunger, and cramped living conditions. It fostered camaraderie among peers, allowed for creative expression, and reinforced social bonds within families and communities. Diaries and reports from philanthropic observers frequently highlight the excitement with which children anticipated caroling events, noting the bright eyes, laughter, and resilience exhibited despite material deprivation. Meanwhile, in wealthier neighborhoods, caroling contributed to the holiday spectacle. Choirs and amateur ensembles performed for families who could afford to host private concerts or attend public events. The music often accompanied lavish dinners, dances, and tree-lighting ceremonies, complementing the visual display of Christmas luxury with auditory richness. In these contexts, carols reinforced social hierarchies, demonstrating access to cultural refinement alongside material wealth, while simultaneously echoing the moral and religious ideals celebrated across society. Caroling also intersected with the urban geography of London. Narrow alleys, open squares, and bustling markets created natural amphitheaters, amplifying sound and creating the perception of communal participation. Voices carried further than one might expect, allowing children's songs to reach ears across socio-economic boundaries. Wealthy families could hear the songs of street children, prompting charitable giving or moral reflection, while those in poverty derived joy simply from participating and expressing themselves in a structured, culturally sanctioned way. The influence of literature on caroling practices should not be underestimated. Charles Dickens and other writers popularized depictions of music and song as central to holiday experience. A Christmas carol includes vivid scenes of singing and communal celebration, reinforcing the link between music, morality, and social cohesion. Such portrayals encouraged families and institutions to view caroling as an essential, instructive component of festive life, cementing its place in the cultural imagination. Ultimately, carols in Victorian London represented more than entertainment. They embodied the social, moral, and emotional dimensions of the season. They allowed the poor a measure of voice and agency, offered wealthy observers a lens into the lives of others, and created a shared cultural practice that bridged class divides, however temporarily. Carols illuminated the city, literally and metaphorically, bringing warmth to cold streets and human connection to lives otherwise defined by labor and deprivation. Through sound, rhythm, and communal participation, the children and families of Victorian London created moments of beauty and resilience. Even in the harshest winters, the voices that carried through snow and fog provided a soundtrack to the holiday, embedding themselves into memory and historical record. The practice of caroling helped shape the moral and cultural understanding of Christmas, linking music with community, joy, and the enduring human capacity to find light in darkness. Christmas in Victorian London was a season of abundance for some and scarcity for many. The disparity between the opulence of the wealthy and the deprivation of the poor was stark, made even more visible during the holiday season. In the grand houses of Mayfair, Belgravia, and Kensington, Christmas feasts became theatrical displays of wealth, taste, and social position, while in the East End and other impoverished districts, families made do with modest meals or relied on charitable handouts. These feasts were more than nourishment, they were symbols, social statements, and a lens into the moral and economic landscape of Victorian society. In the homes of the upper classes, Christmas dinners were carefully orchestrated affairs. Tables were laden with multiple courses, each prepared with meticulous attention to both flavor and presentation. Roast meats, including goose, turkey, venison, and sometimes exotic game, were accompanied by rich sauces and seasonal vegetables. Puddings soaked in brandy or wine, cakes adorned with marzipan, and imported fruits like oranges, apples, and pears concluded the meal, often followed by an array of sweets and chocolates. Wine, port, and champagne flowed freely, complementing the culinary extravagance. Every detail, from silverware to crystal glasses, reinforced the family's social status and wealth. Hosting a Christmas feast was also a performance of etiquette and social expectation. Invitations were extended to peers, and attendance was both a mark of social standing and an opportunity for networking. In addition to the dining room spectacle, entertainment often followed: orchestras, amateur theatrical performances, or private concerts filled the evening with music and drama. Servants, dressed in livery, orchestrated the smooth execution of the event, ensuring that every guest felt both impressed and indulged. Historical records, including newspapers and diaries, frequently detailed these feasts, reflecting the broader societal fascination with wealth, display, and the cultural significance of Christmas. Meanwhile, for the urban poor, Christmas dinners were modest at best. A family might manage a small joint of meat, bread, and some seasonal vegetables, or rely on the generosity of local charities for a festive meal. Mission halls and parish organizations organized Christmas dinners for children and adults alike, sometimes supplemented with small tokens such as oranges, nuts, or sugar. These meals provided both sustenance and symbolic inclusion in the holiday, yet they highlighted the vast inequality that defined London's winter streets. The scarcity of ingredients and the modesty of portions underscored the daily struggles that families endured, transforming even a simple meal into a moment of celebration. The contrast between feasts for the wealthy and the modest, meals of the poor, illustrated larger social dynamics. Industrialization had concentrated wealth in the hands of a few, creating visible markers of class difference. Luxury ingredients, many imported through expanding trade networks, were inaccessible to working-class families, emphasizing the social gap. Christmas, therefore, became not only a time of joy, but also a lens through which disparities in wealth and opportunity were made apparent. Food itself carried symbolic meaning. In wealthy households, exotic fruits and spices demonstrated global reach and sophistication, while in poorer districts, locally sourced ingredients were a testament to resourcefulness and endurance. Puddings, pies, and roasted meats were often shaped by tradition as much as by taste, linking culinary practice to cultural identity and seasonal ritual. The act of sharing a meal, whether lavish or modest, reinforced social bonds, familial care, and communal participation. Charity played a critical role in bridging these divides. Philanthropic efforts extended beyond meals to include the distribution of clothing, bedding, and other necessities. Large-scale initiatives, often organized by religious institutions, sought to ensure that the poorest children and families experienced some semblance of the holiday. Historical records describe the excitement and gratitude expressed by recipients, emphasizing that even minimal sustenance could transform the experience of Christmas. For children, food was not merely nourishment, but also an emotional and social anchor. Receiving a small slice of meat, a pudding, or a single fruit became a memorable event, creating lasting impressions of care, generosity, and hope. Accounts from the period recount children savoring every bite, sharing treats with siblings, and participating in communal dining as a source of joy and learning. These practices emphasized the moral and emotional dimensions of holiday feasts, linking sustenance with social values, cultural education, and human connection beyond the domestic sphere. The commercialization of Christmas food expanded rapidly during the Victorian era. Bakeries, confectioners, and grocers promoted seasonal goods, catering to both the affluent and aspiring middle classes. Mince pies, plum puddings, and elaborate cakes were sold in stores, often presented in decorated boxes as gifts. This commercialization blurred the lines between sustenance and status, transforming food into both commodity and cultural symbol. The social rituals surrounding Christmas feasts reinforced societal hierarchies while simultaneously inspiring moral reflection. The display of abundance encouraged charitable acts, as the privileged were confronted with the reality of urban poverty. Wealthy families often participated in philanthropy not only as moral obligation but as cultural expectation, distributing meals and gifts to schools, orphanages, and mission halls. These acts, though limited in scope, offered a tangible expression of empathy and social responsibility, shaping public perception and contributing to evolving cultural norms. Culinary practices also carried seasonal symbolism. Ingredients like spices, fruits, and preserved meats linked the feast to the broader rhythms of trade and agriculture, connecting local celebrations to global economic networks. The preparation and consumption of these foods reflected careful planning, ritual, and aesthetic sensibility, demonstrating that Christmas feasts were not merely about eating, but about performing cultural identity, reinforcing social norms, and participating in a collective experience. In conclusion, Victorian Christmas feasts reveal a city of contrasts, where abundance and scarcity coexisted within blocks of the same streets. Lavish dinners in aristocratic mansions highlighted wealth, status, and performance, while modest meals for the poor reflected resilience, community, and the moral significance of small gestures. The holiday became both a mirror and a moral test, reflecting societal divisions while encouraging acts of generosity, cultural participation, and human connection. The taste of a pudding, the aroma of roasted meat, or the sweetness of a single orange carried significance far beyond nourishment. They were markers of social position, instruments of moral teaching, and vessels for human memory. The legacy of these feasts endures. They illustrate how a shared cultural practice centered around food can simultaneously entertain, instruct, and reflect the inequalities and hopes of a society. From glittering mansions to mission halls, Christmas feasts in Victorian London were more than meals. They were stories, experiences, and reflections of a city grappling with both wealth and deprivation. In Victorian London, the anticipation of Christmas was inseparable from the ritual of gift. For the wealthy, gifts were opulent, carefully chosen to display taste, sophistication, and social connections. For the poor, presents were scarce, yet their significance could not be overstated. Behind closed doors, whether in mansions or cramped tenements, gifts carried emotional weight, symbolizing love, hope, and the tenuous joy that marked the season amid vastly different social realities. In affluent households, Christmas gifts reflected both wealth and moral education. Children of the upper class received elaborate toys, books, and clothing, often imported or handcrafted, designed to demonstrate refinement, creativity, and intellect. Dolls with porcelain faces, miniature furniture, and finely detailed model trains were common, alongside collections of books ranging from illustrated fairy tales to moral instruction. Parents and tutors carefully selected these gifts, balancing delight with social expectations of proper upbringing. Diaries from this period describe children eagerly unwrapping parcels, their excitement heightened by both the novelty of the objects and the ritual of presentation. Gift-giving was also a public display. Servants and household staff were frequently involved in the ceremony, arranging parcels beneath Christmas trees, assisting with wrapping, and participating in formalized presentations. Wealthy families viewed this practice as an extension of social hierarchy, reinforcing both family bonds and the roles of household members. The act of giving and receiving gifts was codified, elaborate, and imbued with significance, providing children with a sense of security, identity, and belonging within their social milieu. For working-class families, gifts were often symbolic and modest. Oranges, small toys, nuts, or simple sweets were treasured because of their rarity. In households where multiple children shared a single room or a single meager meal, a gift could become the centerpiece of celebration. Parents often scrimped and saved throughout the year, investing hard-earned wages to provide even a single small token. The process of planning, acquiring, and presenting gifts was itself an act of love and sacrifice, creating memory and meaning beyond material value. Historical records, including letters and social reports, document children's joy at receiving these gifts, emphasizing the emotional resonance that transcended scarcity. Charitable institutions played a pivotal role in supplementing gifts for poor children. Ragged schools, mission halls, and church groups organized gift distributions, often during December, allowing children to experience the excitement of presents despite their families' limited means. Oranges, toys, and simple confections were distributed alongside religious instruction, songs, and communal meals. Volunteers, often from middle or upper class backgrounds, facilitated these events, creating brief but memorable moments of inclusion and joy for children who would otherwise be excluded from festive culture. The act of giving gifts in Victorian London was deeply intertwined with morality. Authors, educators, and reformers emphasized that the spirit of generosity reflected Christian virtue and civic responsibility. Gifts were not merely material objects. They were tools for shaping character, instilling gratitude, and reinforcing social cohesion. Literature from the period, including Christmas stories and moral treatises, frequently depicted children learning lessons of empathy, kindness, and reciprocity through the practice of giving and receiving presents. These narratives reinforced social norms while providing cultural guidance on proper behavior during the holiday season. Moreover, the anticipation of gifts created an emotional rhythm to the season. Children counted the days until Christmas, peering at windows, counting the items under the tree, or speculating on the contents of parcels delivered to neighbors. This suspense, amplified by scarcity, heightened the significance of the gifts themselves. Diaries and letters describe children savoring these moments, holding items close and sharing with siblings, demonstrating that even modest objects could provide immense joy and emotional richness. Gift-giving also reinforced family and communal bonds. Siblings shared toys, neighbors exchanged small presents, and communities organized collective celebrations. Even in densely packed tenements, where privacy was limited, families found ways to create intimate moments of delight. The physical act of wrapping, unwrapping, and sharing gifts fostered interpersonal connection, creativity, and the ritualized performance of care, making Christmas a time of heightened emotional significance regardless of material wealth. In wealthy households, gifts sometimes served as instruments of social networking. Children of aristocratic families were often presented with items that signaled alliances, status, or connections, such as jewelry, books, or clothing from prominent houses. These gifts reinforced social hierarchies, while teaching children the subtleties of obligation, gratitude, and social etiquette. The careful curation of presents underscored the intersection of material display and moral instruction, blending pleasure with responsibility. Meanwhile, the popular press helped codify the cultural importance of gifts. Newspapers and magazines published guides for selecting presents, advertised new toys and treats, and offered advice on proper etiquette. These publications influenced both middle and upper class households, expanding awareness of trends and reinforcing the commercialization of the holiday. Gift-giving, therefore, became both a personal and social act, shaped by evolving norms, consumer culture, and moral expectations. The legacy of Victorian gift-giving continues to resonate today. The tradition of carefully chosen presents, festive wrapping, and symbolic gestures originates in this era, blending emotion, social signaling, and cultural expectation. Yet, the experience of children in poverty underscores the profound human dimension of gift-giving, that a single orange, a small toy, or a shared treat could carry immense emotional weight, embodying love, hope, and a fleeting escape from hardship. Ultimately, gifts behind closed doors, whether in mansions or slums, illustrate the duality of Victorian Christmas, a season defined by both material abundance and human resilience, by spectacle and intimate care, by societal hierarchy and individual emotion. The act of giving and receiving was more than a tradition. It was a lens through which the values, inequalities, and aspirations of Victorian society were vividly revealed, captured in the joy of children and the deliberate generosity of those who could provide it. In Victorian London, the Christmas season transformed the city into a spectacle of contrasts. Streets glittered with decorations, shop windows displayed lavish goods, and the glow of gas lamps reflected off frost-covered cobbles. Yet, beneath this veneer of festivity, the reality for the majority of Londoners was starkly different. Poverty, overcrowding, and disease permeated the city, creating a complex juxtaposition of opulence and deprivation that defined the holiday experience for those living in the metropolis. The West End and shopping districts epitomized the glitter. Department stores and shop fronts competed for attention, displaying ornate toys, imported fruits, fine clothing, and confectionaries in elaborate arrangements. Windows were adorned with painted scenes, mannequins, and moving mechanical displays, enticing passers-by with visions of wealth and abundance. Middle and upper-class shoppers navigated these streets, carrying parcels and engaging in seasonal rituals of consumption that reinforced social status, familial care, and the spectacle of Christmas as a performative event. Gaslighting amplified the sense of grandeur. By the mid-19th century, London's streets were increasingly illuminated, transforming the urban landscape at night. Shoppers and children alike were drawn to the bright, flickering lamps, which highlighted both the decorative displays and the architectural elegance of commercial thoroughfares. The interplay of light and shadow created dramatic visual contrasts, enhancing the magic of the season while also exposing the divide between rich and poor. The illuminated facades of wealth and the dimly lit alleys where children struggled to survive in stark contrast. The East End and industrial districts remained places of gloom. Narrow alleys, overcrowded tenements, and poorly maintained streets were lit only by occasional lamps or candlelight. Families in these neighborhoods faced harsh living conditions, with inadequate heating, insufficient food, and limited access to public services. Winter deepened the challenges, bringing frost, damp, and heightened risk of illness. Children in these areas had to navigate crowded streets, often working, begging, or running errands, with little time or means to participate in the festive displays enjoyed elsewhere. This juxtaposition of glitter and gloom shaped both perception and experience. For the wealthy and middle classes, Christmas was a time of celebration, reflection, and charity, while for the poor, it remained a season of survival, punctuated by rare moments of joy. Contemporary accounts, including social reports, letters, and diaries, document the emotional impact of witnessing wealth from a distance, children peering through shop windows, adults marveling at displays, and families navigating streets where abundance was visible but largely inaccessible. Commerce played a central role in the glitter. Stores sold not only toys and sweets, but also decorative items, books, and imported foods, encouraging consumption as both pleasure and social signaling. Advertisements and catalogues emphasized novelty and luxury, creating a sense of desire and aspiration among shoppers. The commercialization of Christmas, while energizing urban economies, simultaneously highlighted the limitations of access for the poor. reinforcing social hierarchies and economic disparity for the city's impoverished children. The streets were both a playground and a site of struggle. While they marveled at the windows and decorations, many were also engaged in labor, selling matches, fruit, or other small goods to supplement family income. Street performances, caroling, and public events offered intermittent diversion, but survival remained the priority. The sensory overload of the glittering streets' bright lights, festive scents, and bustling crowds contrasted with the child's daily reality, creating a layered, sometimes disorienting experience of the season. Charitable acts mediated these contrasts. Wealthy donors and philanthropic institutions organized soup kitchens, mission hall celebrations, and gift distributions, providing food, clothing, and small toys to children and families in need. These interventions, while limited in scale, created temporary pockets of relief and joy amidst the harsh conditions of industrial neighborhoods. Accounts describe children's delight at receiving simple gifts, their faces illuminated by candlelight or the glow of lanterns, moments that temporarily bridged the gap between glitter and gloom. The emotional and cultural significance of the streets extended beyond material conditions. Festivals, public gatherings, and performances offered opportunities for communal experience, fostering a sense of inclusion and participation. Even in the poorest districts, children and adults engaged in rituals of decoration, singing, and storytelling, adapting festive practices to their circumstances. These practices reinforced social cohesion, cultural identity, and resilience, demonstrating the human capacity to create meaning and joy even in constrained environments. Visual contrasts underscored social awareness. The opulent West End, with its polished sidewalks, bustling shoppers, and decorative windows, became a symbolic space of aspiration, highlighting both opportunity and exclusion. The dimly lit East End, with its narrow courts and overcrowded housing, revealed the harsh realities that coexisted alongside wealth. Photographs, illustrations, and newspaper descriptions from the period emphasize these disparities, providing modern audiences with vivid documentation of the stark contrasts that defined Victorian urban life during Christmas. Public celebrations, such as church parades, municipal decorations, and seasonal fairs, added layers of spectacle to the streets. While these events were more accessible than private displays, they still emphasized social hierarchies, admission fees, location, and the availability of goods or refreshments often limited participation for the poorest families. Yet, these gatherings also provided moments of inclusion, allowing children and adults to witness pageantry, engage with festive rituals, and experience the communal rhythms of urban Christmas. Seasonal work added complexity to the street environment. Street vendors, musicians, carolers, and performers moved through alleys and squares, creating dynamic interactions between social classes. Children as young as 7 or 8 contributed to family income by selling goods, while adults navigated congested streets for employment or shopping. The layering of commerce, celebration, and labor created an urban tapestry in which glitter and gloom coexisted, influencing both perception and experience of the season. The sensory landscape was striking. Aromas of roasted chestnuts, baked goods, and spiced wine mingled with smoke from chimneys and the chill of winter air. The sounds of carolers, street performers, and clattering horses blended into the hum of urban life, creating a soundscape that was simultaneously festive and harsh. These sensory experiences shaped memories. emotional responses, and cultural imagination, providing a rich backdrop for understanding Victorian Christmas through the eyes of children and families across social strata. Ultimately, the streets of London during Christmas were emblematic of broader societal contrasts. They highlighted inequality, resilience, and the human capacity to celebrate in spite of adversity. Glitter and gloom coexisted, defining the holiday season as a time of both spectacle and struggle, joy and hardship. For children, these streets were classrooms of social observation, stages for play, and arenas for survival. For adults, they were sites of commerce, charity, and cultural negotiation. The layered complexity of the urban landscape ensured that Christmas was never merely a single experience, but a multifaceted reflection of life, society, and human emotion in Victorian London. In the hidden corners of Victorian London, Christmas joy often came in the smallest and most unexpected forms. For children of the working class, the season was rarely defined by grand feasts or lavish gifts. Rather, it was the quiet, secret pleasures, shared slice of cake, a single orange, or a small toy that became the most cherished markers of holiday happiness. These moments, modest in scale yet immense in emotional weight, provided a sense of agency, celebration, and hope amidst a life dominated by labor, scarcity, and societal neglect. Even within the smallest tenements, families found ways to mark the season. Parents would carefully ration sugar, butter, and flour to bake simple cakes or puddings, saving just enough to give each child a taste of festivity. Historical letters and diaries reveal the care with which these treats were prepared, often at great personal sacrifice. The act of baking became a ritual. Children helped measure, stir, or decorate, infusing labor with anticipation and delight. A single sweet morsel, shared among siblings, could become the centerpiece of a child's memory of Christmas, highlighting the interplay between scarcity and joy. Oranges, considered exotic and expensive, held a particular significance. Imported from Spain and the Mediterranean, they were a rare gift for most urban families. To hold and peel an orange was an act of wonder, and sharing slices with siblings or neighbors created a profound sense of community and generosity. Social reformers and writers of the period frequently cited the orange as emblematic of Victorian Christmas for the poor, a symbol of both delight and aspiration. The simple pleasure of tasting something beyond the ordinary daily diet became a marker of the season, underscoring how minor luxuries could shape human experience. Small toys, whether a wooden soldier, a tin whistle, or a handmade doll, carried similar weight. Even when mass-produced and modest in appearance, they represented imagination, play, and a temporary escape from the harsh realities of labor and poverty. Children would invent games around these items, teaching one another how to play, creating elaborate stories, or hiding them for later enjoyment. These acts of creativity and concealment reveal how play and joy persisted even in constrained circumstances, demonstrating the resilience of childhood. Imagination. The emotional impact of these secret treats extended beyond the children themselves. Families often experienced the joy collectively, reinforcing bonds of care and affection. Parents, despite exhaustion and financial pressure, found pride in providing for their children, even in the smallest ways. Acts of sharing and giving, whether in the form of a morsel, a toy, or a moment of attention, became rituals of love, symbolizing parental devotion and reinforcing family cohesion. Letters and journals from the period attest to the pride and happiness adults derived from orchestrating these small triumphs for their children. Charitable interventions amplified these experiences. Philanthropic institutions, including mission halls, churches, and ragged schools, distributed treats and gifts to children who might otherwise have nothing. Social reformers such as Charles Booth and Dr. Barnardo documented these acts, noting the transformative effect even minor gifts had on children's morale and sense of belonging. Donations of oranges, cakes, and small toys were sometimes accompanied by short festivities, including singing, storytelling, or communal play. These interventions, though limited in scale, created a sense of inclusion, bridging the gap between deprivation and festivity, and temporarily alleviating the stark social contrasts of the city. Schoolrooms and mission halls became focal points for these tiny triumphs. Teachers and volunteers organized small Christmas parties, offering lessons, songs, and games alongside the distribution of treats. These events emphasized moral instruction, social cohesion, and cultural literacy, while allowing children to participate in collective celebration. The importance of these gatherings lay not only in the material provision, but in the creation of shared memories, communal identity, and cultural continuity. Children learned to navigate social rituals, to express gratitude, and to enjoy small pleasures, skills that extended beyond the holiday season. Urban street life added another dimension to these secret joys. Children trading small gifts, sharing pastries, or playing in the snow created informal networks of social interaction. Ragged clothing and limited resources did not prevent moments of creativity, humor, and delight. Street games, caroling, and collaborative improvisation provided additional avenues for pleasure, reinforcing agency and resilience. Observers of the era frequently noted the ingenuity of children in creating fun and celebrating despite deprivation, highlighting the contrast between scarcity and imagination. The symbolic value of these small treats was profound. A single orange or sweet could represent hope, aspiration, and the possibility of abundance, even if fleeting. Oral histories and diaries often emphasize the emotional memory attached to these items, which persisted into adulthood. The experience of scarcity, coupled with the careful provision of a minor luxury, taught lessons in patience, gratitude, and community, reinforcing moral and social norms embedded within. Victorian society, commercialization of Christmas also intersected with these small pleasures. Toy shops, sweet vendors, and grocers marketed inexpensive items to working-class families, fostering participation in the festive culture even amid financial constraints. Seasonal fairs and markets provided access to small novelties, confections, and fruits, allowing families to create meaningful experiences within limited means. The circulation of these goods highlights how consumer culture and charitable action coexisted to shape the emotional landscape of Christmas for children across social strata. The psychological dimensions of these experiences were significant. Anticipation, secrecy, and the act of discovery heightened emotional engagement. Children would hide gifts, savor sweets over multiple days, or carefully ration their treats, deriving satisfaction not merely from consumption, but from agency, control, and delayed gratification. Such practices cultivated social intelligence, emotional resilience, and a sense of personal accomplishment, demonstrating that even modest pleasures could have profound developmental and emotional effects. In literature and social commentary of the period, these tiny triumphs were frequently highlighted as emblematic of the broader moral and social imperatives of Christmas. Writers and reformers used the stories of children's delight in small gifts or treats to illustrate the importance of empathy, charity, and moral stewardship. The symbolic weight of the orange, the cake, or the toy communicated lessons about social responsibility and human connection, reinforcing cultural ideals that extended beyond the holiday season. In some, secret treats and tiny triumphs reveal the layered nature of Victorian Christmas. For children in poverty, these experiences were not merely acts of consumption but opportunities for creativity, social bonding, emotional growth, and participation in cultural traditions. For families and charitable institutions, they provided avenues to express care, nurture resilience, and bridge social divides. The significance of these small pleasures lies not in their material value, but in the human stories they generated, moments of joy, agency, and hope that illuminated the harshest corners of Victorian urban life. Through the lens of these modest celebrations, the complexity of Christmas in the era becomes evident. The holiday was simultaneously a marker of inequality and a testament to human ingenuity, empathy, and resilience. The small treats, carefully hidden gifts, and ephemeral delights of children navigating foggy streets and dim tenements encapsulate the enduring human capacity to find joy, connection, and meaning even in circumstances of deprivation. In the quietest hours of Christmas Eve, the city of Victorian London held its collective breath. Amid the fog, frost, and flickering gaslight, churches opened their doors for midnight mass, a tradition that combined religious devotion, community gathering, and a brief respite from the harsh realities of urban life. These services were attended by families from all social classes, offering a momentary convergence of wealth and poverty, solemnity and celebration, in a ritual that had both spiritual and social resonance. For the urban poor, midnight mass was a profound event. Children and adults alike, often exhausted from long days of labor or errands, would walk miles to reach the nearest church. The journey itself, through crowded streets, icy pathways, and sometimes treacherous alleyways, was part of the ritual, reinforcing endurance, anticipation, and communal connection. Mission halls and parish schools occasionally arranged organized processions, providing guidance, safety, and a sense of occasion. Attendance offered more than spiritual nourishment. It was a rare opportunity for respite, warmth, and social inclusion in a society that otherwise marginalized the working class. Inside the churches, the contrast between light and shadow enhanced the emotional impact. Candles, oil lamps, and stained glass reflections illuminated the pews, highlighting both the ornate architecture and the congregation's varied faces. Choirs sang carols and hymns, their harmonies echoing against stone walls, creating an atmosphere of reverence, awe, and emotional depth. The combination of music, ritual, and communal presence fostered a sense of belonging, linking the participants to centuries of Christian tradition, while providing immediate emotional and psychological relief from their daily struggles. For the wealthier attendees, midnight mass was both spiritual practice and social performance. Aristocratic families often arrived in carriages, attended by servants, and positioned themselves in reserved pews. The service offered an opportunity for moral reflection, reinforcement of social values, and public display of devotion. Children from affluent households, accustomed to both luxury and etiquette, were taught to participate with decorum, learning the rhythms, rituals, and moral lessons embedded in the ceremony. Historical accounts note that such participation was considered an essential aspect of a proper Victorian upbringing, intertwining piety, culture, and social expectation. The sermons delivered during midnight mass frequently addressed both spiritual and social concerns. Clergy emphasized themes of charity, empathy, and moral duty, particularly toward the poor and disadvantaged. Passages from Scripture were interpreted in ways that encouraged benevolence, community engagement, and personal reflection. For many congregants, these messages reinforced cultural norms, providing guidance on proper behavior, social responsibility, and ethical living during the holiday season. The sermons were both didactic and emotional, shaping the mindset of participants across classes. Music played a transformative role in the service. Choirs and organists performed traditional hymns, as well as newer compositions reflecting Victorian tastes. Singing was participatory, with congregations joining in choruses that reinforced collective identity, emotional resonance, and cultural continuity. The melodies and lyrics, often familiar from earlier in the season or from printed hymnals, evoked nostalgia, moral reflection, and communal harmony. For children, both wealthy and poor, the experience of participating in carols and hymns at midnight provided emotional intensity and memory, linking spiritual practice with sensory experience. Rituals surrounding the Eucharist or communion offered additional layers of meaning. For families attending the service, these practices reinforced moral instruction, ethical reflection, and communal belonging. Even children, guided by parents or parish staff, learned the symbolic significance of bread and wine, cultivating awareness of shared belief, tradition, and moral responsibility. These rituals provided tangible connection to spiritual ideals, embedding them within lived experience and reinforcing the communal structure of society. Social dynamics within the church were complex. While the sacred space aimed to unite participants across classes, disparities were evident. The placement of pews, access to seating, and proximity to clergy or choir often mirrored social hierarchies. Observers noted that while spiritual equality was preached, material and social realities remained visible. Nevertheless, the shared experience of Mass, carols, and prayer created moments of temporary equality, in which the collective focus on worship and celebration overrode, if only briefly, the divisions of wealth and status. Children, in particular, experienced midnight mass as a deeply emotional event. The combination of anticipation, ritual, music, and candlelight created heightened sensory awareness, embedding the ceremony into memory. Diaries and letters from the era recount the awe of children observing the altar, the thrill of singing in harmony, and the communal warmth amid winter cold. These experiences fostered moral understanding, cultural literacy, and emotional depth, highlighting the ways in which ritual practice shaped Victorian childhood. Public celebrations often intersected with religious observance. Bells rang from church towers, signaling the commencement of services and punctuating the city's soundscape with resonance and significance. Carriages, street vendors, and pedestrians moved along cobbled streets, creating a tapestry of human activity that contrasted with the solemnity of the service. This layering of sacred and secular, private devotion and public spectacle exemplified the multifaceted nature of Christmas in Victorian London. Midnight Mass also facilitated charitable action. Collections and donations during the service provided resources for parish schools, mission halls, and relief efforts for the poor. These acts reinforced the moral imperatives emphasized in sermons, linking spiritual reflection to tangible social action. The presence of children from impoverished families further personalized these appeals, reminding congregants of the real human consequences of generosity, and integrating charity into the ritual fabric of the holiday. The timing of midnight mass, bridging Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, emphasized transition and anticipation. Congregants left the church under a sky tinged with the first light of winter, carrying both spiritual and emotional enrichment into their homes. For poor families, the journey home often included shared reflections, the quiet enjoyment of treats, or the simple pleasure of warmth and shelter. For wealthy families, it reinforced the cycle of celebration, reflection, and preparation for the luxurious festivities of the following day. In essence, midnight mass and its accompanying murmurs provided a crucial dimension to Victorian Christmas. It combined spirituality, community, music, and moral instruction, creating a shared cultural experience that transcended social boundaries while acknowledging them. For children and adults alike, the service offered a pause from labor, a lens into cultural and religious practice, and a profound emotional anchor in a city marked by contrasts of wealth, poverty, and daily struggle. Winter in Victorian London was both beautiful and brutal. Snow and frost transformed the city into a landscape of stark contrasts. Cobblestone streets glittered with icy reflections of gas lamps, while hidden alleys and overcrowded courts became treacherous paths for the city's poorest residents. Amid these harsh conditions, human warmth, both literal and emotionally, merged as a defining feature of the season. Families, neighbors, and charitable organizations found ways to bring light, comfort, and joy into the frostbitten streets, creating moments of resilience and community that defined the human experience of Christmas. For working-class families, daily survival often took precedence over festivity. Many adults worked long hours in factories, workshops, or as domestic servants, returning home exhausted and often cold. Children, though not yet employed in full-time labor, assisted with household tasks, errands, or small jobs such as selling newspapers or matches. Despite these hardships, families endeavored to create warmth and celebration within their homes. The hearth became a focal point, not only for cooking, but for gathering, storytelling, and shared reflection. Accounts from the era describe children huddling together by the fire, listening to parents recount tales of past Christmases, or learning to sing carols by candlelight. The physical environment amplified the harshness of winter. Frost-coated windows and doors, while snow and ice rendered streets slippery and difficult to navigate. Poorly insulated homes struggled to retain heat, leaving families exposed to cold and illness. Charitable initiatives often provided blankets, clothing, and other essentials, alleviating some of the hardship. Mission halls and parish schools offered warm meals and small tokens, ensuring that children could experience festive comfort even if fleeting. These acts of provision underscored the moral and social responsibilities embraced by segments of Victorian society, reflecting a commitment to community care amid extreme inequality. Neighborhoods became microcosms of social resilience. Families and neighbors shared resources, swapped food, and provided care for one another in a practice of mutual support. Children played in snow-laden streets, improvising games from simple objects or constructing makeshift sleds. Adults, though often laboring under fatigue and scarcity, engaged in small acts of kindness, from sharing a loaf of bread to ensuring that a neighbor's child had a warm scarf. These practices reinforced communal bonds, highlighting the human capacity to create joy and connection even amid adversity. Charity and philanthropy were central to Victorian Christmas. Wealthier citizens, driven by moral obligation, social expectation, or genuine empathy, organized distributions of food, clothing, and gifts. Mission halls, churches, and charitable societies coordinated with local authorities to reach children and families most in need. Oranges, sugar, and small toys were distributed alongside warm meals and festive gatherings, creating moments of happiness in otherwise harsh circumstances. Historical records emphasize that these interventions were carefully timed to coincide with Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, maximizing emotional impact and ensuring participation in the seasonal rituals of joy and celebration. The experience of children on the frostbitten streets illustrates the interplay of hardship and delight. Despite limited clothing, long walks in cold weather, and exposure to harsh conditions, children found ways to celebrate. They exchanged small gifts, sang carols, and invented games using whatever materials were available. The anticipation of treats, whether a slice of cake or a rare orange, provided emotional sustenance, enhancing resilience and reinforcing hope. Observers of the time frequently remarked on the ingenuity, cheerfulness, and endurance of children navigating these conditions, highlighting the capacity for joy in even the most constrained environments. Winter labor-shaped daily rhythms and seasonal experiences. Many families relied on additional work to supplement income during the holiday season, including street vending, cleaning, or odd jobs. Children often participated in these efforts, balancing responsibility with anticipation of festive treats. The tension between work and celebration intensified the emotional impact of Christmas, making the rare moments of warmth, nourishment, and joy especially meaningful. Diaries and letters from children and adults alike attest to the layered nature of these experiences. Fatigue and hardship interwoven with excitement, family connection, and communal celebration. The built environment mediated these experiences. Gas lamps, street markets, and temporary decorations transformed certain streets into festive corridors, even within impoverished districts. Patches of light illuminated frosty windows and the faces of children playing outside, providing a fleeting sense of enchantment. Shops and vendors offered small treats, and the smell of roasted chestnuts or baked goods often permeated alleys, creating sensory markers of the season. These cues reinforced anticipation, social engagement, and cultural immersion, allowing even the poorest residents to participate in the shared rhythms of Victorian Christmas. Spiritual life contributed to the warmth experienced amidst frost and scarcity. Churches and mission halls offered spaces of refuge, comfort, and moral reflection. Services included carols, prayers, and sermons emphasizing empathy, community care, and charitable action. For children, participation provided a sense of belonging, identity, and ethical guidance. These institutions functioned not only as religious centers, but as focal points of communal warmth, where the harshness of winter was mitigated by human connection and spiritual reinforcement. Small acts of kindness became culturally significant during the holiday season. Neighbors offered assistance in navigating icy streets, shared stoves or firewood, and invited friends or extended family for meals. These gestures reinforced community cohesion and emphasized social morality. Victorian literature and periodicals frequently depicted these practices, portraying them as emblematic of Christmas spirit, moral education, and the triumph of human warmth over environmental and social hardship in parallel. The experiences of wealthier families highlighted contrast rather than deprivation. Carriages glided along frost-coated streets, bringing well-dressed children to grand houses for festive gatherings. Gaslight reflected off polished windows, illuminating snow-dusted avenues where merchants and street performers catered to holiday shoppers. The juxtaposition of glittering wealth and frostbitten hardship defined the urban landscape, emphasizing social disparity while providing opportunities for charitable engagement and moral reflection. The emotional significance of these experiences was profound. For children, a shared slice of cake, a small toy, or a brief moment of communal play provided memories that persisted into adulthood. For adults, witnessing joy amid hardship reinforced empathy, moral responsibility, and a sense of purpose. The winter streets, though physically harsh, became arenas for human resilience, creativity, and emotional connection, illustrating how social, cultural, and moral values intersected with daily life during Victorian Christmas. In some frostbitten streets and warm hearts exemplify the paradoxes of Victorian urban life, adversity and delight, deprivation and generosity, struggle and celebration coexisting in layered, meaningful ways. Winter cold amplified the stakes of kindness and charity, highlighting the significance of both material and emotional provision. The rituals, practices, and interactions of families, children, and communities transformed the season into a human story of endurance, hope, and shared joy. Through the lens of these frost-bitten streets, the essence of Victorian Christmas emerges as a complex tapestry of social contrasts, moral engagement, and the enduring capacity of human warmth to illuminate even the coldest winter nights. The sound of Christmas in Victorian London was inseparable from carols and the flicker of candlelight. Music, whether performed in the home, on the street, or within church walls, created a soundtrack that defined childhood experiences and shaped the emotional landscape of the season. For children across social classes, carols were more than mere entertainment. They were vehicles of cultural education, moral instruction, and communal bonding, amplified by the warm glow of candles that punctuated long winter evenings in homes. Carols often accompanied candlelit gatherings. Families, huddled together for warmth, sang traditional hymns and seasonal songs passed down through generations. Singing fostered participation, creativity, and a sense of shared identity. Children learned lyrics and melodies orally, sometimes improvising verses or harmonies. These practices strengthened familial bonds and provided a rhythmic structure to the holiday, integrating moral and religious instruction into moments of delight. Diaries from the period frequently recount children learning to sing "God Rest Ye Merry," "Gentlemen," or "The First Newell," highlighting the blending of joy and education. Candles played both practical and symbolic roles. In the absence of widespread electric lighting, candles illuminated homes, churches, and public spaces, creating an atmosphere of warmth and intimacy. In addition to their functional purpose, candles symbolized hope, spiritual presence, and the festive spirit. Children often helped arrange candles on mantles or tables, learning responsibility and contributing to the aesthetic and emotional environment. The flickering light enhanced the sensory experience of Christmas, emphasizing the interplay between warmth, shadow, and anticipation. Street caroling expanded these practices into public spaces. Groups of children or community members would traverse neighborhoods, singing for coins, small gifts, or simply to share the joy of the season. For working-class children, Caroling offered both amusement and practical benefit, sometimes supplementing household income. For those observing from windows or doorways, the sounds provided communal cohesion, bridging social gaps and reinforcing shared cultural identity. Reports from the era describe the delight of children listening to carolers outside their homes, their imaginations stimulated by melodies that transcended immediate hardship. Churches incorporated carols into midnight services, parish gatherings, and charitable events. Choirs performed intricate arrangements, guiding congregations in participation. Music reinforced ritual, moral instruction, and communal belonging, with children often playing central roles. Participation in these performances instilled confidence, discipline, and emotional expression. In addition, carols often conveyed moral narratives, recounting biblical stories, ethical lessons, or communal values, effectively blending entertainment, education, and cultural transmission. Candlelit pageants and nativity scenes further enhanced the sensory and moral dimensions of the season. Mission halls and schools frequently staged miniature performances in which children enacted biblical stories, with candles illuminating costumes, props, and improvised scenery. These performances cultivated creativity, cooperation, and narrative understanding, while providing aesthetic and emotional engagement. Observers noted that children often remembered these experiences vividly, linking visual, auditory, and communal elements to enduring seasonal memory. Material culture reinforced these practices. Printed hymnals, illustrated songbooks, and handbills distributed by churches and schools provided accessible means for children and families to participate in caroling and candlelit activities. Families could reference texts while gathering at home, ensuring accuracy of lyrics and fostering literacy. These printed materials democratized participation, allowing working-class children to access cultural content that had previously been limited to wealthier households or formal education. The psychological impact of carols and candlelight was significant. Participation created anticipation, heightened sensory awareness, and emotional engagement. Singing as a group fostered feelings of inclusion and collective identity, while candlelight provided a sense of security, warmth, and aesthetic pleasure. Children learned to synchronize action with peers, to navigate social rituals, and to experience moral narratives through performance, embedding ethical and cultural education within festive practice. Charitable initiatives often intersected with musical activities. Mission halls, orphanages, and social societies hosted caroling events accompanied by candles, refreshments, and small gifts. These events allowed children from impoverished backgrounds to participate fully in seasonal culture, creating emotional equity in an otherwise unequal society. Volunteers, teachers, and clergy facilitated these gatherings, reinforcing social norms, moral instruction, and communal values while fostering joy and inclusion. The cultural resonance of carols and candlelight extended beyond immediate practice. Victorian literature, newspapers, and personal diaries frequently described the visual and auditory richness of these traditions, emphasizing their role in moral development, social cohesion, and emotional memory. Stories of children's delight, familial participation, and public engagement illustrate how these rituals became embedded in cultural consciousness, shaping perceptions of childhood, community, and seasonal identity. Candlelight also served practical functions in streets, markets, and public gatherings. Gas lamps provided general illumination, but candles offered portable light for carolers, late shoppers, and pedestrians navigating icy streets. The interplay of flickering flames against snow, fog, and architectural facades created a distinctive sensory environment, enhancing the emotional impact of winter celebrations. Children experienced these visual effects with heightened imagination, associating the glow of candles with anticipation, mystery, and the warmth of human connection amidst harsh conditions. Educational institutions leveraged carols and candlelight as tools for socialization. Schools integrated musical and visual activities into seasonal instruction, teaching children to follow rhythm, participate in group performance, and understand moral narratives embedded in song. The combination of music, performance, and illuminated settings cultivated both practical skills and emotional literacy, demonstrating the holistic nature of Victorian cultural pedagogy. Finally, these traditions offered lessons in resilience and joy. Even in the poorest households, families improvised candlelight, sang together, and participated in local caroling events. These acts reinforced agency, creativity, and the human capacity to celebrate despite material constraints. For wealthier families, the same rituals offered continuity, moral guidance, and aesthetic pleasure, bridging generational gaps and reinforcing social identity. Across social strata, carols and candles created shared cultural touchstones, connecting individual experience to broader community and tradition. In sum, carols, candles, and childhood encapsulate the sensory, emotional, and cultural dimensions of Victorian Christmas. Music and light-mediated social experience shaped moral understanding and created enduring memory. Through participation in these traditions, children learned to navigate society, express emotion, and engage with both familial and communal identity. The interplay of sound, light, and social ritual reveals how even in a stratified and often harsh society, human creativity, joy, and connection flourished during the winter season. In Victorian England, the holiday season was often defined by small victories, the simplest joys, and the imaginative worlds children created around modest possessions. Toys, whether purchased, handmade, or gifted by charitable organizations, became vessels of creativity, hope, and social learning. Combined with storytelling both oral and written, they transformed ordinary winter days into rich experiences of wonder, delight, and memory. For children navigating the hardships of poverty, these tiny triumphs provided not only pleasure but also emotional resilience and the formation of identity. Amidst challenging circumstances, toys occupied a central role in shaping childhood experience. Mass production in the 19th century allowed a greater number of working-class children to access small items such as wooden soldiers, spinning tops, dolls, or tin whistles. Despite their modest nature, these toys were deeply meaningful. Children assigned personalities to figures, enacted miniature narratives, and engaged in games that fostered creativity, collaboration, and storytelling. Historical accounts describe children hiding toys under beds, creating secret play areas, or inventing elaborate rules, demonstrating how imagination amplified limited material resources into rich, engaging experiences. Handmade toys also held special significance. Parents, siblings, and neighbors often contributed to crafting small objects for children, from rag dolls to simple wooden animals. The act of making a toy carried symbolic weight. It represented care, effort, and personal investment. Children were aware of the labor and love embedded in these gifts, which heightened the emotional impact and created enduring memories. Letters and diaries from the era frequently described the pride children felt in receiving or creating handmade objects, reinforcing familial bonds and emphasizing the interplay between scarcity and joy. Stories and storytelling intertwined seamlessly with play. Oral narratives, fairy tales, and biblical stories provided frameworks for imaginative exploration. Children reenacted tales with their toys, merging fiction with personal experience. Mission halls, schools, and public readings also disseminated written stories, ensuring literacy, moral instruction, and cultural continuity. Storytelling created narrative scaffolding for play, allowing children to navigate social norms, moral lessons, and aspirational ideas within a safe, imaginative space. It fostered creativity, empathy, and social awareness, demonstrating the pedagogical function of leisure in Victorian society. Charitable interventions extended the reach of toys and storytelling. Organizations such as Dr. Barnardo's Homes, the Ragged School Union, and local churches distributed small gifts alongside festive readings and performances. For many impoverished children, these occasions were the only opportunity to possess a toy or participate in structured play. The distribution of these items was accompanied by rituals, including song, storytelling, and brief performances, which reinforced cultural norms and moral guidance. Contemporary observers emphasize the profound emotional effect of receiving even a modest gift, noting the temporary but powerful uplift in spirits and morale. Toys also served as instruments of socialization. In shared spaces such as streets, schoolrooms, or mission halls, children negotiated ownership, turn-taking, and cooperative play. They learned to navigate social hierarchies, exercise patience, and engage in collaborative problem-solving. Games incorporating toys often included role-playing, strategy, and imitation of adult life, reflecting broader societal structures and values. These practices highlighted how play functioned as both recreation and informal education, embedding practical skills and ethical understanding within enjoyable activities. The emotional resonance of toys was amplified by scarcity. The limited availability of sweets, small gifts, and toys made them precious symbols of attention, care, and human connection. Children treasured even the simplest items, understanding their rarity and the effort required to obtain them. This awareness enhanced gratitude, patience, and relational skills, reinforcing the moral and psychological lessons embedded in Victorian childhood culture. Diaries and letters from impoverished families frequently recount the intense delight elicited by receiving a small gift or toy, demonstrating the emotional weight of minor luxuries. Storytelling reinforced ethical lessons, cultural literacy, and imagination. Popular publications, including serialized fairy tales and moral fables, shaped children's understanding of virtue, bravery, and social responsibility. In domestic spaces, parents and siblings narrated personal anecdotes, historical events, or religious stories, blending education with entertainment. Play and storytelling intersected to create dynamic, layered experiences that were emotionally enriching, socially instructive, and culturally meaningful. Children learned to navigate both fictional and real worlds, translating narrative understanding into practical and moral awareness. Toys and stories also facilitated memory-making and intergenerational connection. Children often recalled past gifts, previous tales, or imaginative play episodes with parents, siblings, or friends. These memories reinforced social cohesion, familial identity, and the continuity of cultural traditions. Even modest play created enduring narratives that persisted into adulthood, linking sensory, emotional, and cognitive experiences into long-lasting cultural memory. Letters and autobiographies from later life frequently reference the formative impact of these tiny triumphs, illustrating their enduring significance. Gender and social norms shaped interaction with toys. Boys often received figures associated with action, labor, or military themes, while girls received dolls and domestic-related items. These distinctions reinforced contemporary notions of gender roles, while providing opportunities for imaginative engagement and skill development. Social class also influenced access. Wealthier children enjoyed a broader array of manufactured toys, whereas working-class children relied on hand-me-downs, small purchases, or handmade objects. Nevertheless, children from all backgrounds adapted creatively, demonstrating the universality of play as a medium for joy, learning, and socialization. Public spaces facilitated communal experiences with toys and stories. Streets, alleys, and local parks became theaters for shared play, with children enacting miniature dramas, competitive games, or collaborative storytelling. Peer interactions cultivated negotiation, empathy, and leadership, while also reinforcing social networks and community cohesion. Seasonal fairs and markets introduced additional opportunities, allowing children to interact with toys, sweets, and stories in broader communal settings, amplifying the festive experience. The sensory dimension of toys and storytelling was particularly impactful. Visual appeal, tactile engagement, and imaginative potential combined to create immersive experiences. Wooden figures, tin toys, and rag dolls provided texture, color, and form for imaginative manipulation, while storytelling engaged auditory, cognitive, and emotional faculties. Children experienced layered engagement, physical manipulation, narrative immersion, and social interaction, all of which reinforced pleasure, learning, and emotional growth. In conclusion, toys, tales, and tiny triumphs revealed the profound human significance of seemingly modest objects and activities in Victorian childhood. Through play and narrative, children navigated social hierarchies, practiced creativity, internalized moral lessons, and experienced joy, agency, and emotional resilience. These practices bridged material scarcity and imaginative abundance, demonstrating the capacity of culture, community, and creativity to transform everyday life into meaningful and memorable experiences. Victorian Christmas was thus defined not solely by wealth or spectacle, but by the enduring impact of small, thoughtfully integrated moments of pleasure, learning, and shared human connection. Victorian Christmas for the working-class families was defined less by extravagance and more by resourcefulness. Amid poverty, scarcity, and harsh winter conditions, the concept of a feast took on symbolic as well as practical significance. A feast of frugality blended limited ingredients, careful planning, and a deep appreciation for what was available. It became a ritualized expression of love, resilience, and communal celebration, offering both sustenance and psychological relief during a season fraught with deprivation. In many households, preparations began days in advance. Women, often mothers or older siblings, meticulously calculated portions, washed and preserved ingredients, and coordinated household labor to create a sense of occasion. Even modest staples like potatoes, cabbage, and dried meats were transformed through skillful cooking, with soups, stews, and puddings serving as the centerpiece of the meal. These efforts emphasized care, forethought, and domestic expertise, highlighting the labor-intensive nature of frugal celebration in an era before widespread refrigeration or convenience foods. Bread, butter, and seasonal vegetables were staples, often augmented by small luxuries when affordable. Oranges, sugar, or a small piece of cake symbolized indulgence and festivity, imbued with psychological and cultural significance. Contemporary accounts frequently mention the delight of children receiving even a single orange, a rare treat that represented sweetness, hope, and participation in the broader cultural rituals of Christmas. The scarcity of such items amplified their emotional impact, demonstrating how symbolic value often outweighed material quantity. Community and mutual aid played crucial roles in ensuring that feasts were possible. Neighbors sometimes pooled resources, exchanged ingredients, or assisted in meal preparation. Parish halls, mission schools, and charitable societies provided additional support, offering meals, donated foodstuffs, or cooking facilities. These interventions not only alleviated hunger but reinforced social cohesion, moral instruction, and the communal aspects of seasonal celebration. Observers of the era noted that shared meals fostered intergenerational bonds, reinforced ethical and cultural values, and created lasting memories of connection and care. The organization of the feast itself was rich. Even in small, dimly lit homes, the arrangement of dishes, the careful placement of food on plates, and the collective gathering of family members reflected cultural norms and the human need for structure. The act of sitting together, sharing stories, and expressing gratitude transformed the meal into more than mere sustenance. It became a moral and emotional experience, linking practical survival to social and cultural identity. Children's experience of the feast was particularly vivid. Anticipation built in the days leading to Christmas, as the household engaged in preparatory labor and small rituals such as decorating windows, hanging garlands, or setting aside treats. The meal itself was often their first significant source of nourishment after a week of limited rations, heightening the sensory and emotional intensity of the occasion. Descriptions from diaries and letters emphasized the delight of children biting into simple cakes, tasting a rare slice of meat, or savoring a single orange, underscoring the psychological and cultural weight of these modest feasts. Food scarcity also reinforced lessons in morality and social responsibility. Parents taught children to appreciate what they had, to share with siblings, and to recognize the effort involved in preparation. These lessons were reinforced through communal activities in schools, churches, and charitable events, where children observed the careful allocation of resources and the deliberate incorporation of moral and spiritual guidance into festive practice. Through this lens, frugality became a means of instilling ethical behavior, patience, and gratitude. The sensory environment of the feast extended beyond taste. Smells of roasting, boiling, and baking filled modest homes and permeated streets in neighborhoods where multiple households prepared meals simultaneously. Candlelight and fireplace glow enhanced visual appeal and psychological warmth, while the sounds of laughter, conversation, and carols created auditory richness, even in cramped, poorly ventilated spaces. These multisensory experiences imbued the occasion with profound emotional resonance, linking physical, social, and moral dimensions of celebration. Charitable feasts were a defining feature of the broader urban landscape. Mission halls and charitable organizations often provided supplementary meals, particularly for children who might otherwise experience deprivation. These events were carefully staged, with attention to decorum, order, and social teaching. Volunteers guided children through hand-washing, seating arrangements, and participation in songs or readings. The orchestration of these events reinforced discipline, moral education, and social cohesion, while simultaneously providing tangible relief from material hardship. Food also intersected with symbolic and religious practice. Traditional Christmas pudding, mincemeat pies, and simple puddings carried embedded meanings of continuity, celebration, and hope. Recipes often included elements symbolic of wealth, prosperity, or moral virtue, linking tangible sustenance with cultural storytelling. Families incorporated these items into the meal with care, often sharing historical anecdotes about preparation methods, family traditions, or seasonal rituals, embedding layers of memory and meaning within the simple act of eating. Work and play converged in the preparation and enjoyment of the feast. Children assisted with minor tasks, observed culinary techniques, and engaged in anticipatory games. This participation served multiple purposes: practical education, moral training, and emotional engagement. Through active involvement, children internalized cultural knowledge, practical skills, and social norms, highlighting how frugality, labor, and festivity coalesced into an integrated cultural practice. Finally, the Feast of Frugality exemplified the broader ethos of Victorian Christmas for the urban poor. It was a celebration defined not by material abundance but by effort, creativity, and shared experience. Scarcity heightened emotional and symbolic significance, fostering gratitude, empathy, and communal cohesion. The careful orchestration of meals, combined with cultural rituals and moral instruction, transformed simple ingredients into profound human experience, demonstrating that even in conditions of deprivation, celebration could thrive through imagination, care, and shared participation. In conclusion, the Feast of Frugality represents the intersection of resourcefulness, community, and emotional richness in Victorian childhood. It exemplifies how material scarcity did not preclude meaningful celebration, but rather intensified the significance of communal effort, ethical teaching, and emotional memory. Through careful planning, charitable intervention, and imaginative engagement, Victorian children and their families experienced Christmas as a season of sustenance, reflection, and deeply human connection. As the Victorian Christmas season reached its climax, the theme of hope emerged as a defining feature, particularly for children in impoverished urban districts. Hope was embodied not in grand material displays, but in the simple, tangible gestures that conveyed care, generosity, and moral concern. A single gifter, small toy, an orange, or a handmade token represented far more than its material value. It symbolized attention, inclusion, and the promise of a brighter future, offering children emotional sustenance and a sense of participation in the cultural and moral fabric of society. Charitable initiatives played a central role in cultivating hope. Philanthropic organizations, mission halls, and schools coordinated the distribution of gifts to children who might otherwise have nothing. Dr. Bernardo's homes, ragged schools, and local parishes carefully planned collections, logistics, and presentations to ensure equitable access. Volunteers, often drawn from wealthier social classes, participated in packaging, delivery, and oversight, emphasizing the moral imperative of generosity while fostering empathy and social responsibility. The presence of adult volunteers also provided role models for children, linking the act of giving to social norms and ethical behavior. The gifts themselves varied widely, from mass-produced items like wooden soldiers, tin whistles, and dolls, to handmade crafts created by parents, siblings, or charitable patrons. Each item carried layers of symbolic meaning. A doll represented care and nurturance. A toy soldier embodied play and aspiration. A single orange suggested abundance and sweetness in a life otherwise marked by scarcity. Diaries and letters from the period frequently described the intense delight elicited by these gifts, underscoring the emotional and psychological weight of even modest presents. The act of receiving a gift transformed the urban landscape. Children traversed frosty streets to attend parish halls, schoolrooms, or charitable events, their anticipation heightened by the communal rituals surrounding the presentation. Bells, carols, and candlelight punctuated these journeys, creating a sensory environment that amplified emotional impact. The moment of receiving a gift was ritualized. Children lined up in order, often guided by volunteers, and participated in brief ceremonies that included songs, blessings, or announcements. These structured experiences reinforced communal norms, taught patience and decorum, and elevated the psychological resonance of the gifts. Hope was also cultivated through storytelling and moral framing. Gifts were rarely presented in isolation. They were accompanied by narratives emphasizing virtue, resilience, and gratitude. Charitable events often included readings from popular literature, biblical passages, or oral stories that highlighted moral lessons. Children internalized these messages alongside the pleasure of their gifts, linking material enjoyment with ethical understanding and emotional growth. In this way, gifts functioned simultaneously as objects of delight and instruments of socialization. The anticipation of receiving gifts was itself a formative experience. Weeks in advance, children might speculate about what they would receive, discuss possibilities with peers, or observe the careful preparation of charitable collections. This period of expectation fostered imagination, patience, and emotional investment. Historical records highlight the intensity of this anticipation, describing children's imaginative engagement, daydreams, and small acts of preparation, such as creating lists or practicing polite expressions of thanks. The process reinforced temporal awareness, delayed gratification, and the cultivation of hope as a psychological skill. For many children, gifts were not just objects, but symbols of recognition and moral inclusion. Receiving even a modest item validated their presence within broader social and cultural networks, reminding them that they mattered to adults, peers, and society at large. The symbolic dimension of gifts reinforced self-worth, community belonging, and ethical awareness, creating layered meaning beyond mere material pleasure. Letters and memoirs from the era reflect enduring gratitude for even the simplest tokens, demonstrating the lasting psychological impact of these interventions. Family dynamics intersected with the culture of gifting. Parents often supplemented charitable presents with homemade items, baked goods, or small personal creations. Even when resources were scarce, these gestures expressed care, effort, and moral guidance. Children were taught to appreciate effort as much as material value, learning lessons in gratitude, empathy, and ethical discernment. The interplay of family-given and institutionally provided gifts created a rich moral ecology, blending private affection with public instruction. The sensory and aesthetic qualities of gifts enhanced their emotional impact. The bright colors of a doll's dress, the polished surface of a wooden toy, or the sweetness of a carefully apportioned orange activated visual, tactile, and gustatory senses. In combination with candlelight, carols, and communal interaction, these sensory experiences intensified emotional resonance. Children's memories often linked specific sensory cues to the broader moral and social significance of their gifts, embedding these experiences into enduring psychological and cultural frameworks. Social interactions around gifts were instructive. Children learned to share, negotiate, and engage in polite behavior while receiving presents. Peer observation reinforced norms of gratitude, patience, and mutual respect. Charitable organizers emphasized these behaviors as part of moral education, teaching children not only to enjoy gifts, but to integrate social and ethical principles into their responses. The process cultivated interpersonal skills, empathy, and a sense of civic duty, demonstrating how material objects were leveraged for broader educational purposes. Gifts also intersected with religious and cultural rituals. Many were presented in church settings, accompanied by blessings, hymns, and recitations, linking secular delight with spiritual significance. Children internalized moral frameworks alongside sensory pleasure, connecting personal enjoyment with broader cultural, religious, and ethical understanding. This fusion of material and moral experience reinforced the coherence of Victorian social and cultural norms, embedding hope within a structured moral and communal environment. The enduring psychological effects of these gifts were profound. For children experiencing chronic scarcity, the presence of even a small treat or toy cultivated optimism, resilience, and emotional regulation. It created narrative continuity across seasons, reinforced trust in social institutions, and encouraged imaginative engagement with the world. Diaries, memoirs, and retrospective accounts frequently highlight the long-term impact of these experiences, emphasizing how formative they were in shaping childhood identity, emotional intelligence, and moral outlook. Finally, the gift of hope exemplifies the broader ethos of Victorian Christmas for impoverished children. It demonstrates how generosity, ritual, and imagination combined to create meaningful, enduring experiences despite material scarcity. Through carefully orchestrated charitable programs, family engagement, and communal participation, children were able to experience joy, moral instruction, and social inclusion. The symbolic weight of these gifts extended far beyond the holiday season, creating a foundation of hope, resilience, an ethical understanding that shaped both individual lives and communal culture. In conclusion, A Gift of Hope illustrates the transformative power of small acts of generosity within Victorian urban society. It highlights how children, families, and charitable institutions collaborated to produce meaningful experiences that transcended material limitations. The simple gesture of giving a toy, an orange, a handmade item, became a conduit for moral education, emotional resilience, and social belonging. Through these tiny triumphs, Victorian Christmas affirmed the enduring human capacity for hope, joy, and connection in the midst of adversity.